you say are the values of vulnerability for us?
Okay, so I've mentioned one already. I think the ultimate aim, and particularly Jesus says that at the end of his life when he's praying with his disciples, our ultimate aim is to become one. Um, and God's desire for us is for us to be fully known. And it's only when we share our vulnerabilities that we can be fully known by someone and fully loved. So that is that is a key aim. I think as well when you're talking to people, particularly people who are struggling with life, the more you can be vulnerable with them, that then gives them permission to start being vulnerable back to you. Um, I think there is a plague in the Western society at the moment where we share with one another at an increasingly superficial level. So we share stuff on social media or we message people, but we don't really talk and we don't talk deeply because we get distracted by so many things in the world. I think society would benefit greatly if we talked in more depth and were more vulnerable with one another. As I say, the more vulnerable you can be, it allows other people to be vulnerable back to you. And I think also with vulnerability, there's also a way of being vulnerable with people. So when someone's being vulnerable to you, the temptation is to come up with there's three things we often do. We often try to change the subject because we feel uncomfortable, or we come up with a solution. We want to come up with a solution. But often the best thing is to just wait and listen, and often just to walk alongside the person, not trying to be the solution giver, but just to let them know that you are there as they work through or walk through their vulnerability. So you don't need to solve people's problems. You just need to be there as a friend to lift them when they're struggling with life and struggling with their vulnerabilities. And that's often a much more effective way of dealing with someone's vulnerabilities when they're speaking to you. The thing not to do, and the thing I think Christians often get wrong, is they love to hear a vulnerability and then make a judgment about someone. And Jesus tells us so many times in the Gospels that we're rubbish at judging others. One of the great things about sharing vulnerabilities is you recognize that actually nobody's normal. There's no such thing as normal. We're all weird, and we've all got our own eccentricities, strengths, and weaknesses. And the more you can hear about other people's vulnerabilities, the more you realize that actually we're all weird, but we're all the same. We're all the same in being weird. Finally, I would say always try to remember how God uses vulnerability. There's not a hero in any of Scripture that he doesn't describe a vulnerability first before they become a hero. So if you look at all the way back to um, Abraham, um, he left the comfort of his hometown. He was a rich guy in Mesopotamia, one of the key trading capitals in ancient history. And God said, leave this place and go to where I direct you. He showed faith by leaving comfort and becoming a nomad, no home, no place to live. And he wandered off, trusting in God. That was his first vulnerability. Then he comes across a king that is demanding that that the king should have his wife, and he's scared that the king might discover that Sarah is his wife. So he says, "Oh, she's my sister," and he lets the king almost have his way with Sarah. It's only God's prompting that saves Sarah from the king. Um, so Abraham is a vulnerable guy. He's got his weaknesses, but God uses those weaknesses to grow him into a great hero of the faith. The same with Moses. Moses actually murdered an Egyptian before running off into the desert because he was scared that Pharaoh was going to kill him. Um, and then you get heroes like David, who is called a man after God's own heart, and yet has an adulterous affair with Bathsheba, and then tries to kill Bathsheba's husband to cover up the affair. And yet he becomes Israel's great king. So, and then there's other characters like Joseph, who basically is accused of rape and thrown into prison, thrown into slavery before he becomes a great hero. So when we think about it, there's a pattern to how God uses human beings. He always exposes vulnerability. He did that on the cross. Jesus died on the cross, completely vulnerable, naked, ashamed, being spat on, bleeding out, suffocating. God always exposes vulnerability before he glorifies the person. So we have a pattern in Christianity that we need to follow. We need to learn how to be vulnerable so that God can glorify us in those vulnerabilities. So this channel is all about trying to help us learn how to be more vulnerable with one another so that God will glorify us, so that we can have better relationships with one another. The trouble with the Western world at the moment is we are in an age where we have superficial communication with one another. We love to show off the highlights of our lives on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. But we're rubbish at sharing our vulnerabilities, the things that we think that if we share, people might hurt us. This whole channel is about helping us to be vulnerable with one another so that we can learn to know one another better and love one another better. So my plea, my request to you is, if you've got a vulnerability, if you want to share something about your life that you think will help or inspire or even encourage others, please comment below. Please get in touch so that we can share your story more publicly. Thank you very much for watching.